Hello and welcome to the Brutal Iron Gym podcast, where our goal is to cut through the BS and deliver the brutal truth about topics related to health and happiness. So today's topic is training, and we're going to talk about improving squat depth, and we have a specific example of a client of mine named Mark. So the reason why we're using a specific example is the reason for people having issues with squat depth is going to be individualistic in many ways. So there are commonalities and common reasons, common issues and stuff. But really, when you meet with an individual, the common stuff is maybe half the equation. I don't know an exact percentage, but there are a significant amount of individual aspects that must be addressed. So I wanted to give a specific example to talk about the commonalities, but also his specifics to give a representation of what some of the specifics may be. So if you are someone listening to this and you want to work on improving squat depth in yourself or in a client or a friend, if you're working with somebody, recognize that some of the stuff that I'm saying here is definitely what you should consider and look for, but maybe not all of it will apply. So, Mark, in conjunction with this podcast, I'm planning to make these podcasts a day in advance. So I'm making this on Saturday when it'll actually come out on Sunday, and I'm planning to on Sunday combine the announcement or kind of showcasing of this podcast on our social media pages with a video of Mark's squat. So some of the changes that we've made to his mechanics and whatnot. So while you're listening to this, you can float over to our social media pages on Instagram, Facebook, or Twitter, and you can see his squat, see his body size and shape and whatnot. And some of what we're going to say in the podcast might just kind of click better since you'll have a visual along with the audio information. So, Mark is 6'4". He has really long femurs. So your femurs are your upper leg bones, and those are extremely important in terms of their effect on squat positioning in regards to like how long or how short they are compared to the kind of like rest of your body. So it's basically how long your femurs are in comparison to your torso, and there's all these other aspects, but I want to just kind of keep it simple-ish and say that if somebody has long femurs compared to their torso, it requires that their hips go further back to balance how far forward their knees are going to go. Okay? So if you draw a triangle upside down, okay? And if I'm trying to so think of a triangle upside down, so you have the wide base of the triangle is actually at the top, not at the bottom. But the wider and wider of a base that I draw, the more extreme the angles have to be of the sides of the triangle. Now, this is a weird visual, but what I'm getting to is if I have a triangle that's upside down and the base is very narrow, the sides can be very upright. But if the base is very wide, the sides have to be tilted over more, angled more, to be able to still connect at the bottom at the peak of the triangle. So when you have someone with long femurs, for them to get this parallel, which would represent a straight line as the base of the triangle if the triangle were upside down, and their ankle being the point of the triangle, okay? Their shins would be one angle of the triangle. So what happens is the longer the femur, the more forward their shins have to be. But if the shin angle dictates that the knees must go past the toes, they won't. Pretty much as the person squats down, when their knees reach to the, kind of like the parallel equivalent, horizontal parallel equivalent of their toes, so when their knees are directly over their toes, their squat depth pretty much shut down, or their knees will start to cave in, or both. So, but basically when the knees get to the front of the toes, the body just kind of stops. Because if the knees were to continue to go forward, the body would load the knee joint very, very aggressively to the point where it would risk injury. So what happens is, if the knees are going to go very far forward, and it would require them to go too far forward, in order to get to parallel, that means the hips have to go back. If the person's hips get pushed back, that keeps their knees back, and they have a chance to still get to parallel. So when someone has really long femurs, it requires that their hips get pushed back more than somebody with short femurs. This results in a more forward body lean. So a person with long femurs has to kind of bend over more in their squat. That's going to require more hip flexibility, okay? The range of motion their hips are able to achieve. And it also requires strength in those range of motion. So what you're actually requiring is what would be termed mobility. So mobility is flexibility plus strength. So flexibility just means, can you get into certain ranges of motion? Can you get into certain positions? Whereas mobility implies that you're strong in those positions. So for Mark, and with anybody with long femurs, for them to get more out of their hip, for them to be able to have that forward body lean, their hip has to both be flexible to get into that position. And we're going to talk about that here in a second, but that can be limited by like glute tightnesses. So in regards to like glute min, med, piriformis, stuff like that, like the smaller muscles of the hip of the glute area, and other issues like adductor tightness and whatnot. So there's a lot of kind of like muscles that will restrict the flexibility of the hips. And then you have to strengthen those muscles once you can get them opened up to allow the position. So you have to get somebody flexible enough to get to parallel, and then you have to strengthen them at parallel. So that's what we've done for Mark. So I've worked with Mark for I think 2 years now. I would have to double check. Let me see real quick if I actually have the date that him and I started. So we started on 9/11/17. So it's actually been a little over 2 years, like 2 years and a couple months. And when he first started, he wasn't that concerned with squatting super low or like getting to parallel. And we were kind of at that time working on general development of muscle tissue, but it wasn't specific towards any purpose. So how we were going to use that strength. But at that time, we were already starting to address hip mobility because we found it to be an issue. Recently, he switched over to wanting to do powerlifting because he likes the motivation behind the purpose behind it for his training. So if he knows he's going to use the strength, it motivates him to go through the workouts that develop the strength. So he started with the goal of powerlifting. Well, powerlifting requires a 1 rep max as part of the competition of squat, 1 rep max of squat. The caveats, or one of the rules of the squat, is that his thighs must be parallel. So we're trying to get him now down to parallel. So for flexibility, in order to get him actually to be able to get into the position of parallel, not even worry about being strong there, just get there, we had to do a lot of stretching, and we had to do what we would call active stretching movements. So I'll explain that here in a second. But we did all of that at the beginning of his workout. So it did us no good to squat in kind of a shortened range of motion. So our first goal was to acquire increased range of motion for the day. And then we were going to resistantly, maybe resistant on his part, but I mean more so weighted resistance. We had to load that acquired flexibility. So at the beginning of the workout, we would do static stretches, which would help kind of like, we did static stretching with a contracting, releasing pattern. So there's fancy terms for all this stuff about like different types of stretches. But we didn't just shove into a position and then crank and pull on the joints for minutes on end. So we got him into a position that felt tight. He contracted a countering muscle to the muscle that we were trying to loosen. So for example, if you get in a lunge position, and the knee that's on the ground is the leg that we're concerned of. Okay, that's the one we're trying to stretch. If you're in a lunge position and knees on the ground, that's going to stretch the quadriceps. Okay, the front of the quadriceps, most notably up towards the top. So if he contracts his glutes, which are the countering muscle of that position, it can actually push him further into a stretch on that quadricep. So if you contract on the countering side of the joint, it can push into a stretch on the other side of the joint. So we would contract the glutes. We would hold that for like a 3 count, like 1, 2, 3. He would relax the glutes, but then kind of lean or leverage further into the stretch of the quadriceps. Then they would actually stretch a little bit more. Then while maintaining that tension, he would flex the glutes again. By flexing the glutes again, it contracted on the opposing side of the joint as the upper quad, and it created more stretch movement. So then once he released the glutes, he was able to push forward even more. So we did that contract release style, quote unquote, static stretches for his hip flexor, his hamstrings, and then we did a more basic static stretch for his glutes. So that's what we started with. The idea of this is it helps to ensure a more neutralized hip position. So his hips wouldn't be tilted forward or tilted backward when we were trying to squat and load his spine and hips. So we got a more neutralized position due to those contract release stretches. Then we did active warm-ups, such as like light weighted movements that require active movement. So there's things called 90-90 transfers, where you're just using your body weight and kind of working through hip rotational exercise. There's also, you can just do body weight lunges. That's a way of kind of stretching and opening up the adductors and hamstrings and glutes. So there's a lot of different movements. Email us at brutalirongym@gmail.com and I can send you a list of some of the ones that we've used in the past. So I have some saved that I can send. Now, I don't know which ones are really perfect for you, but you can try them and kind of see which ones you like. So same thing for the stretches. If you're interested in the stretches, just use an email at brutalirongym@gmail.com. So we have them available on our YouTube channel, Brutal Iron Gym. So if you write, Brutal Iron Gym stretch on YouTube, you'll find some of those videos. So that was our goal. So we did static kind of contract release stretches. Then we did active warm-ups, okay, 90-90 transfers, single leg bodyweight hip thrusts. We did walking lunges, side lunges, just anything that kind of got him active and moving. Even abductor machines, kind of just getting blood into the hips and get his range of motion increased under weighted load. Then we supersetted different type of active resistance weighted stretching movements with his squats. So he might do 90-90 transfers, then go squat the regular bar for 5 reps. He'll load that to 95 pounds next on the bar, but he'll do the 90-90 transfers again before he does the next set of squats. So during his first 3, 4, 5 warm-up sets of squats, we included movement therapy as part of preparing him for the heavier and heavier weights of the squats. So basically everything in the first half of his workout was movement therapy. It was intended to increase his range of motion and then strengthen that range of motion. So movement therapy in general is just helping somebody move better. So if they have poor quality of movement in any way, you would do movement therapy. You would address that poor quality movement before you then load the tissues. And you want to restore a good position before you load a bad position. So that's the idea. So we addressed flexibility and loaded stretching movements twice a week. So for a little while, we tried them every day. And I, for the most part, I think he stuck with it. So I do his programming for him, but I don't necessarily be with him at every workout. So I'm assuming he did that. So I know he did everything else I'm telling you because we talked about it. We meet. And I'm assuming he did the stretches every day as well, every workout day. So he works out 4 days a week. So that helped a lot. Then what we did for strength was we practiced squats. So once we could get him to move well, since we wanted to get better at squats, we practiced squats. So that allowed him to kind of practice technical cues, practice positional cues, get a feel of what the squats should feel like as he's learning new positions. So as his flexibility improved, he could get into new positions. Then we had to help his strength and awareness of those positions. So that's what squats was able to do for us. We use squat variations like paused squats and slowed eccentric squats. And we even did variable speed slowed eccentrics and even combined them with pauses at times. So the idea of it was to increase his time under tension, especially in the lower portion of the squat where his hips were most challenged, And also we wanted to increase the time under tension to improve his positional awareness within the movement of the squat. So it helped a ton to do squats to get better at squats. But we had to do very specific styles of squats to highlight the issues that we wanted to strengthen. So somebody else might need different variations, but for him, paused and slow eccentrics and variations of those two was the best variations for us to use of barbell squats. Then we also included assistance exercises that were both just basic, heavy, put some heavy weight on you, kind of strengthen all the things in your legs and hips. And that would be like leg press, hack squat, belt squats, stuff like that. Then we even did like box squats on the belt squat and stuff like that. So then you had specific positional strength issues, like exercises. So those might be single leg, stiff leg deadlifts to work on hip mobility in terms of like support, while he was also stretching the hamstrings and glutes and stretching the adductors. So a single leg stiff leg deadlift helps stretch certain muscles, but it also helps fire some muscles to hold you in a position, so hold the hip joint protective and stable. So we tried different movements like that. So a lot of the things we did, we layered in for multiple purposes. So in general, his workout was movement therapy first, with contract release stretches and weighted active warm-ups. Then we did basic heavy squats with variations such as paused, slow eccentrics, and variables of those. Then we did heavy movements such as leg press, hack squat, belt squat, box squats, paired with specific positional strength movements such as single leg stiff leg deadlifts, walking lunges, and stuff like that. So that was the structure that we used, and that's what has allowed him to improve his depth of his squat. So when we first kind of started working together, his range of motion was very limited, and that's why I wanted to include the post on social media. Was it might look like a half a squat, basically, but that was the best he could do because his knees were getting to the front of his toes and his hips were really tight. So we had to work on those issues in order to correct the knees going forward. We actually had to loosen the hips and create more flexibility so his butt could go further back, but it wouldn't go back if it was going to be weak there. So we had to strengthen that as well. So that's made the biggest changes in order to improve his depth of squat, and that helps protect his knees, his lower back, helps him perform to the standard he wants, and just all around have better mobility, better strength, better health benefits. So it's going to make him healthier in the long term, okay, when he's 60, 70, 80, that he can actually squat to parallel, have freedom of movement in his hips, but actually be strong in those as well. So when he bends over to pick up things around the house, does work around the yard, plays with his kids, all those things, he's not going to have stiffness and soreness. He's not going to have pain. He's going to feel good and feel physically able to do that stuff. So some of the corrections, like special corrections we did, was we gave him raised heels. So you can use Olympic lifting shoes, which have a raised heel, meaning your heel is 3/4 of an inch higher than your toes. And that creates a little bit of a forward slant in your foot. You still want to have pressure in your heel, so you still have kind of a balanced pressure in your foot, even though the foot is slanted forward. What that does is that decreases the required range of motion of the ankle joint, and for many people that allows them to have better knee positioning. It can help them prevent knee caving. When their ankle joint kind of bottoms out or can't move much, there has to be some compensation of the knee to address that, and often the knees will cave in. So we had to give him raised heels compared to a flat foot. And that's okay. There's nothing wrong with that. You just you're modifying it to help him be in a safer, better position. We also used a low bar position rather than a high bar position. So a high bar position has the barbell on your upper back placed on the top edge of the shoulder blades. A low bar position kind of has it follow what's called the spine of the scapula and sit on your rear delts. So it's about an inch or two lower of a position. That makes a huge difference because it lessens the lever arm from your hip to the bar. So the distance from your hip to the bar is very important. The shorter you can make that, the more forward of a body angle you can have with less lower back stress. Since he has the long femurs, and since that requires a forward body angle, it was beneficial for us to make that body angle easier for him to get into and safer on his lower back to get into. So that helped a lot to move from what's called a high bar to a low bar position. The other thing we did was we found out the correct upper body angle for him. So we found that when he squatted, if as he went down, he was pushing his knees forward, pushing his butt back, and got to a 45-degree angle of an upper body angle, that as long as he paid attention then to pushing his knees out, he was able to hit parallel and be super safe, flat back, everything being actively involved equally. So we identified his correct specific upper body angle. Now that's not always the same for everybody, and there's also different considerations for shoulder health based on how forward of a body angle someone could be, as well as how low on the back the bar can go. So those were some of the special corrections that we made for him, was raised heels, low bar position, and identifying the correct upper body angle at 45 degrees. So that is everything we went through in Mark's training to improve his squat depth. And that led to improved overall health and just balancing of flexibility and strength in the ankle, knee, and hip joints. So that's going to keep him safer, keep him stronger, build more muscle, do all the things that he wants to do. So that's everything we did for Mark. So that's an example of some things that you would want to be aware of if you're looking to improve your squat depth. Like we said, the exact issues are going to be different per person, but this gives you a great example of some of the things that you want to look at. Okay? So if you have any questions about the stretches we used, the active warm-ups we used, shoot us an email at brutalironGym@gmail.com and we'll send you some examples. Okay? I don't want to send the example of his programming because you shouldn't follow it. It's not for you. So I think it would be actually slightly irresponsible of me if I shared this program, because people who want to improve squat depth, they may have other issues other than Mark's issues. And if they were to follow Mark's advice, they actually might put themselves in dangerous positions. So I'm not being a jerk in the sense that I don't want to share the information. I don't want you to get hurt. So if you have questions, if this is something that you have an issue with, is squat depth, of course we're happy to help. So if you live nearby, we can do training sessions in person, like we do with Mark. If you live afar, we can do online programming and video review, which I do with Mark as well as all my online clients. So it's something we do on a regular basis. I watch videos for hours and hours every week. I watch people squat in person for hours and hours every week. This is all I do. So if you would like help with yours, email us. You can even shoot us a video and I can give you some quick 2-minute tip. Okay, so I'm not going to spend an hour because otherwise I'll go out of business if I do 3 hours all the time. But I will give you an opinion. So I'll take a minute or two. I'll send you some tips and some information. If you want more in detailed stuff, we can sign up for some programming help. But at least you'll get something to start with. So if you want to send a video, Instagram works very well. Our Instagram is brutalironGym@gmail.com. Please edit it to just the useful part of the squat. Don't make me watch 2 minutes of you getting psyched up and set up for the squat. So please edit it to just the squat part, okay? But you can send them on Instagram. You can send them Facebook Messenger. I don't think email allows for a very large file, so you might not be able to send them email, but you can send them through Instagram and Facebook Messenger, okay? So if you have issues with squat depth and you want to improve that for overall health and or strength and aesthetics, always reach out to us. We're happy to help. We do this all the time. We're happy to help you, okay? So we can help you with movement therapy. We can help you figure out whatever your issues might be and get you on the road to success. Cool. So thank you for listening to this, and I hope it helped. So anything you need at all, just shoot us an email at brutalironGym@gmail.com. Thank you. If you like the podcast, please share it with family and friends. The more people we help, the happier the world will be. Also, if you like this information, you can find more from us on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter at Brutal Iron Gym. And if you have any questions, feedback, or suggestions, we'd love to hear from you. The podcast is for you, so we want to know what you want to learn about. You can tell us at our email at brutalironGym@gmail.com. As always, I hope this was helpful, and thank you for listening. And thank you for watching.